Hello, dear audience. Today we are going to continue the journey that we started a few weeks ago when we started speaking about three major virtues that are present in the New Testament that are given to us through our Lord Jesus Christ and His apostles: faith, hope, and love. And we already discussed and explained what the first two are, hope and faith. And today we are going to talk about the crown of the virtues, the love, that is present on this planet in every single creature. It's a phenomenon. Sometimes it's impossible even to imagine what love is, because all we can do is be a vessel of love and make it work through us. There are so many examples in the world that explain what love is, but yet we cannot completely depict the love. The greatest concentration of love is Jesus Christ. And if we want to know what love is, we have to become like Him and learn from Him, who is the incarnation of love. Love is present in every creature, as I said, and I remembered a story from my grade school that was written for little children who go to the zoo and look at the animals. And sometimes they look at the animals as an entertainment for them, and sometimes they don't treat them the way that they should. And this story is about a monkey who had a baby. And one of the kids who visits the zoo wants the baby monkey. And his father was determined to do everything to please his son. So he goes, talks to the people in the zoo and buys the baby monkey. After 2 or 3 weeks, they get a call from the zoo and say that the mother monkey is dying. They have to bring the baby back. So they bring it back, and they say that the minute they took the baby away, the mother stopped eating, and it was almost dying before they brought the baby back. Sometimes we wonder if this or the other person has love in his heart or in her heart, but we see that even the animals are gifted with this great feeling, and they suffer if they lose somebody, like the human beings. And I remember while I was coming to the studio, the words that are in the New Testament: if you don't have love, if you don't practice what you say, your words are like the musical instrument, the gong, I think that's what the Bible uses, and it doesn't have any strength. I have always been surrounded with loving people. I can name those people who have passed me from one stage to another in my life. They have been priests, fellow students, or other people, and I have seen that love in people, and I am a witness for that. And I want to tell one small story why I don't think that anybody who is experiencing love or projecting love can speak about it is explained by this small story. They say that Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, had a visitor. One of her relatives visited her with a little kid. And while they talked, afterwards the relative says to the Prime Minister, "Would you please give suggestion or explain to my child that eating sweets is not good for him, because he eats so much sweets and he doesn't listen to me. So you are an authority, you may say something and he will listen to you." And the Prime Minister says, "Well, would you come after a week or so, and then I will do that for you?" And then they come after a week, and she explains how bad the sweet is for your teeth, for your intestines, for your health. And the mother was surprised. Why after a week? And she asked the Prime Minister, "Why did you call us after a week? You explained quite good. Did you study about it or something?" She says, "No. The day that you asked me, I had just eaten some sweets. And I couldn't explain it because I had done it myself, and I like sweets too." So she wanted to have time to keep herself away from sweets, to be able to speak about it and to convince the little boy that sweets are not good. And so, because of this reason, I have Presbyteria Kyriaki, who experiences the greatest love I have ever seen, love of saint. Presbyteria, I'm very happy to have you with us today.
And you set me up. Thank you with those sweet, kind words. When you were saying the story about Indira Gandhi and the relative that came, and I was feeling a little sorry for Indira Gandhi sort of being manipulated by the relative to try to get something out of the relationship in addition to whatever the visit was. And so, but how gracious she was and thoughtfully responded to it and did many things. Was thoughtful to both the parent and the child, was thoughtful to the request, was respectful to the child, and that she was respectful to the child in that response, that would not speak against eating sweets without she herself thinking about it, abstaining from it, and entering more deeply into what that meant for her before she shared that advice with the young relative. Mm-hmm. And what you were reminding me of from that scene is how when love is real, when love is authentic, it's life-giving and it's always in conjunction of relationship. There's always a kind of connection to another. For us as Christians, we see that as in the presence of God, as the other with a capital O, and the other person, or other persons, or creatures, if we're dealing with something from creation that we're dealing with lovingly. But love is always expressed in and through relationship, for something beyond ourselves. And so if it's real, while it might feel good sometimes, love is not a feeling. Sometimes we will receive love and we can feel that sometimes. Sometimes we can offer love and we can feel that sometimes. And that's a sweet and wonderful feeling. But the even better thing is we can be loving, we can actually say, I love you, and on the inside not always feel that, because love is more than just the emotional connection. Love is more than just the sensation that we might be fortunate to feel sometimes, either in receiving or giving. And that's really very good, that love is more than that. And that little story of Indira Gandhi struck me in a way that it was very loving, maybe not so much fun for her.
Yes.
But it was a very loving thing what she did on many levels.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about love not being always a joy or fun or a feeling. As I shared with you a few minutes ago about the Saint Bernadette, I watched the movie yesterday. There were two phrases that took my attention very strongly. One is that when she sees the vision of Holy Virgin, the first thing that the Mother of God tells her is, I don't promise any happiness for you in this life, but in the next. And the second one is the last words that she pronounces when she was already passing away. She can see her in front of her standing while she's dying, and the last words are, I love you, and she passes away. It's amazing how much suffering she had throughout her life, and yet, first, she didn't feel that she was suffering. Second, that she ended her life with the expression of love to the person who basically put her into so much trouble, but promised greater joy later. What is your comment on this?
Several. Let me start with two, if that's okay. The first is just on the initial impression of what you saw in that scene, is again that love was expressed within relationship between Bernadette and she was having the visions of the Virgin Mary, the Holy Virgin, and her whole life was dedicated to loving God through her intercessions. That's what the movie was about. Yeah. I saw that movie when I was a little girl, but it's been a long time. And so the suffering was real. At the same time, something more was happening because she was in a growing relationship with God. She was in a growing relationship with the Holy Virgin. And so love is always within the context of relationship. one of the few things I wanted to share with the audience and with you is the famous passage on love that most everybody, Christian and not, at least in our society, has heard to some degree. That's in 1 Corinthians, starting on verse 13, which talks about, St. Paul talks about what does it mean to be a loving Christian within the community. Now, he's talking within the context of other people. And so it's not just love in the abstract. Oftentimes, this little passage is used in marriage ceremonies, people promising their fidelity to one another. That's a very good application of these words, because marriage is a community also. But to remember that these words are said within a community of believers, of Christians, who are encouraging one another to love one another as God loves us, and to love one another as God would have us love one another, and also our other brothers and sisters, if they're not Christian, and all of creation. Love tends to spill over, tends to overflow and splash everywhere it happens to go. And I'm using the Oxford Study Bible. Why? Because most people in our audience probably are familiar with the King James or the RSV. And those are very good translations. But since this is another very good translation, sometimes it causes us to rediscover certain passages that we hear all the time using one word when sometimes a slightly different word saying the same thing helps reawaken our hearts to what the power of the passage might be. And so I won't read the whole thing because we don't have forever. But he says that if I may speak in tongues of men or of angels but have no love, I am a sounding gong, as you said earlier, or a clanging cymbal. I may have the gift of prophecy and the knowledge of every hidden truth. I may have faith enough to move mountains, but if I have no love, I am nothing. I may give all I possess to the needy. I may give my body to be burnt, but if I have no love, I gain nothing by it. Love is patient and kind. Love envies no one, is never boastful, never conceited, never rude. Love is never selfish, never quick to take offense. Love keeps no score of wrongs, takes no pleasure in the sins of others, but delights in the truth. There is nothing love cannot face. There is no limit to its faith, its hope, its endurance. Some translations say at this very end, love bears all things, love hopes all things, endures all things.
That's a very interesting approach, how love is. Because I shared with one of my friends a story that I had heard way years ago, a story about a saint. They asked him, what would you do if you go out to the middle of the town and see one of your brothers sinning in front of everybody? What would you do? And he said, I will cover him up. This is an answer that is arguable. Why would you do that? Who would do that? And in what manner, in what circumstances this would be done? Because I asked my friend, without telling him the answer, I said, what if you saw me doing something very bad in front of the people? What would you do? He was stuck for a minute and he said, well, I'll just walk away. His explanation was that after so much that you know, and I know you, and if you're still capable of doing something that bad, I'm powerless. I don't know what to do. But please, your comments on this. Why would that saint cover up his brother if he saw him committing sin? Christ says, when you know that your brother has a fault, tell him separate, and then tell him in front of witnesses, and then tell him in front of the people, and then just forget about him. What is your comment about this?
Because to grow in love means to grow in a heart of compassion. And as our hearts grow in compassion, a kind of selflessness, true love, agape love, and there's many words that can translate to mean love, but the love that we're talking about here, and that the scripture that I was quoting from refers to, is the Greek word agape. Agape love is sacrificing, is self-sacrificing. And so in the story, The monk took off his cloak, in a sense putting himself between his friend who was doing something inappropriate and evil and the public, so that he would take on, in a sense, the scorn of the public. He did two things. That he was sacrificing, and B, he was striving to spare his friend from being shamed. One of the worst experiences of the human psyche is to be shamed. All addictions, many compulsive behaviors, many psychological disorders. If addictions and psychological disorders stood on three legs, one of the legs addictions and many psychological disorders stand on is shame, right? Because shame tries to annihilate the person from the inside out. It seeks to destroy the person. When I'm feeling shamed, and we have talked a little bit about shame in the past, or humiliation, shame and humiliation have nothing to do with healthy shame, which is humility. Humility and healthy shame have nothing to do with toxic shame, unhealthy shame, humiliation. Humiliation and toxic shame are used as a weapon to undermine the integrity of another person, to obliterate the witness and the value of another person. When I'm feeling shamed, I'm feeling so devalued. In a sense, it's experienced as an explosion, where I would rather have the earth under my feet open and swallow me whole and have me not exist than suffer that poisonous, evil negativity and disapproval of the audience. And so what the story talks about is the compassion, the enormous compassion this monk had to try to save his friend from being shamed, even to the point where he would take on some of that. That's enormously self-sacrificing. Mm-hmm. That his heart in compassion had grown so much through the love of God that it could take it more than his friend who was doing something shameful. Mm-hmm. And probably had experienced a lot of shame to get to that place.
Mm-hmm. I have another story. These are good stories, and I want our audience to share with us those stories because they have helped me throughout my life. This is about two monks. They come down from the monastery, which was on the hill, and they go to town to buy some necessities, the food and things that they needed. And when they get to the marketplace, they split. One goes this way to get certain things, and the other one goes this way. And they had to stay overnight somewhere to meet the next day and go back. So the next day in the morning when they meet in the same place, one of the monks says, "Well, I think I'm not coming back with you." He's like, what's the matter? And he says, "Well, I was tempted and I broke my vows and I cannot come back. I don't have face to come back." So the second monk doesn't say anything for a minute and then says, "Well, I think you should come back, and I will tell you why. Because you actually feel sorry for what you did, but the same thing happened to me, and I don't really feel sorry for it. I mean, I don't feel like I'm not worthy to go back. And since we have done the same thing together, let's go back together, and maybe we'll talk to the abbot and he will forgive us." And so they walk silently all the way up to the mountain, and they go straight to the abbot's cell and confess in front of him that we both, in separate places, broke our vows, and we ask your forgiveness and your prayers to God for forgiveness. And the abbot says, "Well, you're forgiven, go." But then he says to the second monk, "You stay, let him go, first one, and you stay here." And the second monk stays, and the abbot says, "Well, thank you for your love and your compassion, and I know that you haven't done anything. And because of you, I forgive him too, because you shared the sin." So this is another example to show how I think what you explained is real.
True love, authentic love, God-inspired love is paradoxical. It doesn't make sense a lot of the time according to everyday life according to the everyday status quo. To treat, Christians are exhorted, and this is something that many other religious perspectives and spiritual disciplines are also saying, are exhorted to love your neighbor as you love yourself. After loving God, the most important thing to do is love your neighbor as you love yourself. In the Greek, the word for neighbor is love your plesion. And plesion means the person, not the neighbor as in most of us think here in the United States, the person in the adjoining apartment or adjoining condominium, or the person who lives in the house next door, because there's already a lot of things in common with the people whom we happen to sort of live in the same geographical location. There's a Greek word for that, and that wasn't used in the New Testament. The Greek word plesion means anybody you happen to be next to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes things a lot more scary. That makes things a lot more uncontrollable. Who is that person we don't know?
Love the Samaritan.
Love the Samaritan. Love the person next to us on the bus. Love the person next to us on the streetcar. Love the person next to us, I don't know, at the Stop and Shop, at the supermarket. And so what does that mean? That's an incredible thing, to love that person as you love yourself. And it's not necessarily to be inappropriate with familiarity with someone you don't know, but it is to consider that other person as just as important in the presence of God as I am, which is whatever that means for me. There is an archbishop that I've come to know somewhat, and he's very well respected. He's actually the Orthodox Bishop of Albania, Archbishop Anastasios. And I've heard him say on more than one occasion that it's his discipline, and he exhorts all his people to treat everyone with the same amount of love. Christian, Jewish person, Muslim, secular person, or what. You treat everybody the same. And if they happen not to be an Orthodox Christian, the only difference is you're not able to exchange communion with them or offer communion to them. But outside of communion, everything should be done in exactly the same way regarding how we love one another. And I'm thinking this is pretty much exactly what Jesus is talking about when he exhorts us to love our God with our whole heart and mind, heart and soul, and to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Since we spoke about loving the neighbor as yourself, now I would like you to a little bit explain what is the true love towards yourself. I remember in one of our previous episodes you mentioned love yourself and your self-love. These are different things, and we can harm ourselves loving ourselves. Would you a little bit?
I appreciate that, Arhadi, because I think there are, in fact, this semester at the seminary at the Orthodox Theological School here in Brookline, I'm teaching a course called Spirituality and Addiction. Mm-hmm. And one of the first questions that came out from one of the students on the first day of class was just this: well, what's authentic love? And what's fake love? And what's codependency? And what is, these are terms we hear often in our society today. And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about this now, and maybe we can talk about it even some more as time goes on. And so there's healthy love and there's unhealthy love. When love is healthy, one of the expressions some of us like to use, it's appropriate, healthy care for self, to do whatever it is we need to do because the Lord does say, love your neighbor as you love yourself. There's some of us who treat ourselves as if we were junk. God does not make junk. And so to treat ourselves with the dignity and love God would want a son or daughter, a beloved son or daughter, to treat oneself as, to speak to your own self, to our own selves, in a way that shows respect that we were created by someone who loves us. Even if our times are tough, even if our health is bad, even if we are experiencing losses we didn't even expect, to strive very hard to, even when speaking to ourselves, to speak with respect and care for the persons we are, because we did not create ourselves. We might have a hand in how we grow, but we did not create ourselves. That's healthy care for self. When care or love for self is unhealthy, it's love of self. And that refers to the Greek term of the sin of philautia, which really means idolatry of the self. where it's not me in the presence of God, striving to grow in the Lord, loving the Lord, treating myself with the dignity I am called to respect, to do, and then to love my neighbor as myself and respond that way with creation. But it's all about me. And God has nothing to do with it. Or God is a pawn in my universe to be used in a way to help me get ahead. And so healthy love for self and love of self, the synaphileptia, are two different things. Now, there's another phenomenon that is unhealthy that we hear a lot in our society talked about, and that is codependency. And there's some very good books recently that are trying to get the word codependency back. It's been used so much, it's lost a lot of its value because so many people use it so much. But one way to think about codependency is when we put other people, even our own selves, in a disharmony or an unbalanced perspective than from what it should be, meaning putting God first and our love for one another second in the presence of God. And so codependency is also sometimes maybe falling under the umbrella, although in a different way, of phileptia. It's not love of self in where I am conceited, so to speak, or narcissistic, but instead where other people take on a bigger proportion in life than they should, as opposed to growing in truth in the presence of God.
I have several models that I would like you to compare now. Love in a relationship of people, like let's say couple that love each other. The typical example, the model example for me of this type of love is the example of Francis of Assisi and Clara, Saint Clara. They loved each other unconditionally, separate from each other, doing their own service, and they loved each other best. And there is even a story about them that Clara was complaining that they don't have time together more often to talk or to have a picnic together. And St. Francis said, we'll do that when the roses bloom. And they said it was late fall, and there was a rose bush next to them, it bloomed. And one of the explanations is that there was such a concentration of love that it helped the roses bloom next to them. And in yesterday's movie, when Bernadette had decided to become a nun, she kind of liked one of the guys that were next door, living in the neighborhood, and the guy liked her too. But since she decided to become a nun, she had to forget about it. And everybody was saying goodbye to her, and the guy met her out of the village, stopped the carriage, and gave her flowers, and said that, Bernadette, I wish you the best. They haven't talked to each other about it at all. They just hiddenly love each other. And he says, I want you to know that since my mother is getting old and it's really difficult, the relationship between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, so I have decided not to get married either. For me, it was very, very kind way of letting her know that I love you, but not stopping her from what she has to do, not making her feel guilty for what she's doing. There is nothing in common, but I'm letting you know I'm not going to get married either.
May I interrupt you?
Yes.
So he was, in a sense, showing her that there was no one else for him.
Yes.
And that
without making her feel guilty about it.
And trusting God,
Mm-hmm.
loving her so much as to let her go the direction she felt God was leading her, and for him to trust the road under his feet, even if there was no one else he would marry, trusting that the love of God will take him where he needs to go through the journey of his own life.
Yes. And now the opposite side of this, the opposite side of the coin is Shakespeare's tragedies, where everybody kills each other for love. There is another classical work that the person is in a prison, he's in a cell, separate, and he sees the daughter of the prison guard, and he falls in love with her. He doesn't have any way of communicating with her, but he loves her. And then they said there is a disease in the prison. All the prisoners die. And the only one who didn't die was this person who was in a great love. And the outcome of this is that the love is so strong that can protect you even from a very dangerous disease. So if you have several comments on this.
That's beautiful. I don't know where to begin. I'll comment on a couple of things.
Okay.
I'll go on with the mystery. Love is a mystery, and it will take us places we never, ever dreamed. And that's one of the things I'm learning now, and I'm just one person, but I've seen a lot. I've worked with a number of people in my life in theology, which has been a gift, in many countries, and also in my life in psychology as a psychologist and pastoral psychotherapist. I've seen a lot, and what I'm grateful for now is that I can say now more profoundly to myself than ever is love is a mystery. I can't figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that what love leads me to do is to keep my eyes open and trusting a day at a time and walking the path I've been called to walk, letting go when I need to let go, walking alongside when I need to walk alongside, sacrificing when I need to sacrifice. Now, when do I know when to do what? How do any of us know? It's the word that I would use is the word discernment, and the discernment, the Greek word is diakrisis, is that ability, and it's according to our spiritual tradition, it's an advanced discernment is an advanced gift of the Holy Spirit, but all Christians are called to strive to grow in this from the very beginning, and this helps us discern when is it that we do what is good for us in that moment. And so it's a living line. And so we cannot prepackage what discernment will look like for our lives one day to the next. And so that will help us in how we love. There will be times when we won't go over a certain line because doing this or doing that will be maybe enabling a bad situation, or feeding the wrong thing to happen. And so we will abstain. In another situation, sometimes the same action will be hopefully helping give life to some place that needs to be given life that's good. And so the issue is diakrisis, is that ability of growing in discernment so we know how to love, when to surrender in love, or when to take a risk in love. All of these are going to be different. One of my new phrases with friends I love very much is that growing in love helps us discern, or discernment helps us to grow in love so that we will know when it is time to hang on the right cross. We don't want to hang on the wrong cross because love is sacrificial. And so, but we want to hang on the right cross, the cross that's authentic for ourselves in the presence of God at that moment. I'm not trying to paint a morose picture. Life does bring suffering. Life brings misunderstandings, betrayals, loss. And so how do we go on, not just survive, but grow from that and become somehow better and richer and wiser and able to be an advocate or even just a faithful friend or witness when it's time?
I wanted to compare the divine love versus the human love to find out if there is any difference between these two types of love. And I wanted to tell the audience today is September 30th. By the time they watch that show, it won't be anymore. And the Universal Church is celebrating Gregory the Illuminator today. And I was reading his life story this morning before I came, and in the Synaxarion, that's the
Lives of the Saints.
Lives of the Saints. It describes unbearable tortures that the king gave to him. And I was thinking that we are talking about love today, and he always stayed loving. And they say that even his wounds cured before the next torture. And that made the king even more angry and to invent worse ways of torturing him. And the strongest thing is what he did is that when he came out of the pit, he cured that king that tortured him so, and gave him love and forgiveness of his sins, because of which he had become a beast. Now, this type of love, and again, if I may draw the parallel with Bernadette, she ended her life with "I love you" to Mother of God. How can a human being be able to reach to this level of love, to live through tortures, through suffering, without even noticing?
The first word that came to mind was surrender.
Mhm.
And surrender is often a good substitute for the word trust. One cannot truly trust unless one surrenders. So surrendering to the love of God, surrendering to the will of God, surrendering to whatever is the good that God is somehow calling us to bear witness to or walk through at that moment. And so surrender is always, we don't feel very sophisticated when we're surrendering. We're always feeling, at least, those of us who are adults and are kind of living at a level of professionalism and sophistication, we feel when we surrender in this way like a 5 or 6 year old, and that's a good thing, because at that level, that allows us the flexibility, that allows us, we become more pliable in a sense on a spiritual, maybe psychological level, to wade through or walk through whatever the choice is, whatever the issue is that we're trying to walk through. And so that surrender, that trust, opens us up to be changed. We don't do the changing, God does the changing. And so you asked earlier about human love and divine love. We're all called to love as God loves.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to happen? It's not going to happen by my own power or your own power. It's by us walking our walk, surrendering when we're supposed to surrender with our eyes open, and walking our talk as God changes us from the inside out. If we're so sophisticated and smart that we're all tough, and because we know it all, we're not going to change. We're going to be know-it-alls, and we're going to stay frozen. That's why when you read the Bible and you see how Jesus treated his persecutors, how he treated the Pharisees, they were know-it-alls. They knew it all. They had their university training, their level of university training. They were well off. They had all the rules down backwards and forwards. And most of them, there were many exceptions, I would think, but their Bible refers to at least one that we know of, maybe more, of persons from that. So except for those exceptions, the vast majority had their hearts and their opinions of themselves in reality frozen hard. So they couldn't grow in love, or this kind of love that God demands of us, which is for us to be supple and open and making choices that change us, and God does the changing, so that our hearts become more merciful, so that we see things. I know people who survive losses that, for example, a couple I know lost their baby. And after a terrible, terrible time, surrendering that, and they never had children after that, and finding a way to go on. One of the things, and they were a loving couple to begin with, but in conversations they would both say, but before, if life mattered, now it matters 5 or 10 times. They don't even, and it's a pretty sad thing, they don't even kill mosquitoes. Not that they were out to kill mosquitoes before, but they don't like killing mosquitoes now. They look for the spiders in their house, and they try to get rid of the spiders, not through pesticides, but by other natural ways of getting them out of their house, and all those little pests that most of us don't like. Because they have great pain, which kind of looks comical at times for even the littlest bit of life. And then when they do kill something, they apologize, they ask for forgiveness. But I'm not making this up. This goes back in ancient Christian spirituality many, many centuries. And I would like to share something from Saint Macarius of Egypt, who talked about this kind of merciful heart that is paradoxical. And he says this: what is a merciful heart? The burning of the heart on account of all creations, on account of people and birds and animals and demons, and for every created being. Because of their remembrance, the eyes fill with tears. Great and intense mercy grasps the heart and wings it out, for the person who is merciful is not able to bear or hear or see any harm or the slightest sorrow taking place in the created world. This holds true on behalf of those who harm him. For these, the person offers prayers continually with tears for their protection and redemption. He does so even for the snakes which crawl upon the ground. All of this the person does out of his great mercy, which moves in his heart without measure in the likeness of God.
Last time I was listening to another conversation about love, and he brought this example from the Armenian poet about sheep that came to him in his dream and said, God bless your son, how was the taste of mine? And they explained how he came up with this poem. They said that he was a student, came back to his village from long time of studies, and his parents had kept a lamb to slaughter for his visit. And when he saw the lamb, he remembered his childhood, the beautiful lambs in the forests, and he said, please don't do it, I don't want it. And they said, well, what are you talking about? We have kept this just for you, that you come and we host everybody and celebrate. And he begged them not to do. They didn't listen to him, and they slaughtered the lamb. And the story behind the poem is that he couldn't sleep all night. He was thinking about the little lamb, and he came up with that little poem. And there was a great debate on the show, because it's a live show, and people were calling and complaining that this is not how it is. You know, we humans are created to enjoy the creation and things like this. But this was the guy's feeling. He had great compassion for the lamb. And it goes with Macarius's idea that even the snakes are very important and we have to love them. And your friends who apologize to the insects, when they ask one of the saints, what is sin? She answers, sin is a love of evil, when somebody loves evil. Now, in our daily lives, we don't commit evil things most of the time, but we have small things here and there.
Sin in the Greek, for example, and I have a feeling in the Armenian, refers to missing the mark. And what's the mark? The love and the will of God. So anything that if the mark is that we're aimed at in relationship, that we're trying to have as the bullseye so that we will grow in relationship, is whatever in the moment of our lives that is pleasing to, helps us grow in the love of God, God's will, then we're not sinning. But the second our attention goes even to something second best, that's sinning. And so all of us sin. And so it's a good thing, it's a wonderful thing to trust in the love of God, which is saying, my love is way bigger than you, way bigger than your brokenness, way bigger than your sin. Just keep trusting me, just keep trusting in me and step toward me.
Okay, thank you very much. We are at the edge of running out of time. Thank you, dear audience. I think you all enjoyed this conversation, and I myself enjoyed it. I learned a lot of things. Thank you, Presbyteria, for wonderful explanations. And we will continue next time on the same topic. Maybe we'll make 2 more, because love is a greater topic than anything else. I haven't even started my questions. So let's continue it. Thank you very much. Be with us, and please write us or email us or call us. Let us know what can we do to improve or change things or make some things different, which will be benefiting you. Thank you very much again.